Wilson, could you do us the honors and call the roll?
Yes, I will. Ramsey Stevens, present. Wes Blackman.
Here.
Joyce Brown. Jerry Leanne Clairday.
Present.
Anthony Gallegos. No. Sam Goodstein.
Present.
Daniel Morgan. I'll put that as a no. Philip Ross Monroe. I'll put that as a no. Deborah Robert.
Present.
Yes. Shamshi Basha.
Present.
And Dave Wilson, present.
You may have called my name, but I had no sound at the moment.
Philip Ross Monroe is present,
All right.
Yes. Thank you, Melissa.
and so is Anthony Gallegos.
Ross Monroe, Anthony Gallegos. Anybody else I missed?
Joyce?
Joyce Brown, okay. Yes. So the only people who are not here are Daniel Morgan.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
City attorney or city clerk, Melissa is here. Is there an attorney?
Glenn is going to be joining us, he said. He might be, I'm not sure where he is. He was going to come in, see if anybody had questions, and
Okay.
then leave. So he should be, let's see, Glenn, wait. Oh, he is here. Let's see. All right, Glenn is here. He's under attendee instead of panelist.
Okay, Mr. Wilson, you all set?
Yes, please
Okay,
proceed.
great. All right, with that, Ms. Brown, would you do us the honors and lead us in the pledge?
Well, I may leave something out, but I'll be happy to.
That's fine.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Whoever's barking, can they mute themselves? Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we get to the business of the first item of business today, which is the election of a vice chair. So unfortunately, we have lost our esteemed vice chair, Ms. White. We are down to 11 members now, and we need someone to make a motion to pick a new vice chair. I will just note that you know, obviously a lot of what we're talking about today is the importance of diversity and equity in our government's, our local government here. So, you know, in that spirit, I hope someone might make a motion for someone who, you know, has evidenced their ability to attend these meetings regularly, provide a unique point of view, and not that not everyone hasn't, but behave themselves with decorum to date. So nominations are encouraged.
I nominate Jerry.
I must respectfully decline. But thank you.
Okay. I'll nominate Deborah.
Don't know that my cognitive can keep up, but and I need a little bit more information as to how much I would have to do depending on my health. So it's a thought.
Well, the main thing you have to do, Ms. Robert, is sub in for me if I'm not in attendance.
I don't know that I'm able to do that on a consistent basis, only because I don't have medically, I don't know that I can do that consistently.
In the instance that I am not present, nor are you, I believe Mr. Wilson then becomes the de facto chair. So there is a backup if you need to default to someone else. And I will note that I've seen you present very compellingly to I believe the planning and zoning or the historic Resources and Preservation Board recently. So, don't be shy here. I was very compelled.
Oh, I'm not shy at all. I just don't know that I would be capable of handling an entire meeting. Because I don't know that I can keep all the detail in my mind when it needs, I'm not sure how to say it. If I prepare for a speech or something, I'm good. On the fly, it takes me a little longer now. I don't know how to say that. I'd love to do something. I just don't know if this is the fit.
Deborah,
Okay.
I think you said that very well. And I think that in that case, you could always pass the gavel.
I hate to, because I'd love to, and I want to be more active, but I'm going to have to pass on this one, but I do appreciate this so much.
All right, Joyce, I nominate Joyce.
Decline, please.
All right, we've made our effort at diversity, Ramsey. Wes has previously declined to be chair. Wes, would you be willing to be vice chair? Making faces.
Do we have a pack of wild dogs to drive me there?
Yep.
Arf. Arf.
I would decline. I think, well, a lot of people have declined. How about Mr. Zaid?
Attorneys are always encouraged.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to decline as well. Sorry, guys. My schedule is getting a little crazy. I recently started working in a housing defense nonprofit, and with the end of the moratorium and everything, we are having a lot of late nights. So I do not think that I would be able to do it, unfortunately. I'm not confident in my ability to make it to every subsequent meeting. So sorry, guys.
Mr. Basha, sorry to put this on you, but would you be willing to not make a nomination? Since I think if anyone declines any further, this needs to be a requirement.
Sure. I think Sam has been doing a great job of corralling us this afternoon. So that's definitely a trait that would be beneficial. So I will nominate Sam.
Second.
All right, I am willing to accept that nomination.
Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Aye.
Randy, could we do a roll call, please?
I believe it's unanimous. Anyone against?
Good enough.
Okay, the ayes have it. All right, great. All right, so getting to the
Sorry, Chair Stevens, but I believe you need a vote on the minutes.
oh yes, sorry, my fault. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve or edit the minutes?
Dave Wilson makes that motion.
Second,
All those in favor?
We need a second.
I second it.
Mr. Goodstein has it. Okay, I'll do this another way. All those against? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, you have
May-
it
may-
unanimously.
May I ask a question about the minutes?
Please.
We had a couple of public comments read at the last meeting. Can they in the future be included in the minutes? Because I would have liked to have seen or gone over what they said in writing.
Ms. Brown, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I actually went through and made high-level notes on those previous comments in anticipation of our discussion today for that very reason. Mr. Wilson, are you comfortable collecting those in anticipation of the next meeting?
If they are in electronic format, if I can simply find them somewhere, but I'll need to know where to get them.
Okay, perfect.
I can send them to you. And
Okay.
My suggestion, I think, would be rather than include them in the minutes, because we are no longer including them in the commission minutes, is that we can email them to everybody with the minutes.
I like that.
Yeah, that's acceptable.
Okay. Just my suggestion.
All right. With that, I will note that at our last meeting, it seemed that we had consensus that today we would be jumping into the discussion of single member versus at-large versus a hybrid commission first and foremost. So unless there are any objections, I recommend that we pick up where we left off and we jump right into that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. City Attorney.
same question as last time. Always happy to stay as long as you want, but if you don't need me, then I'll save you the money, but it's up to you all.
Does anyone have any questions for our honorable city attorney?
I do. The question involves partisan and nonpartisan elections. And I don't know if you got the notes I sent out, if Melissa forwarded them to all of you, but one of them involved changing from nonpartisan to partisan elections. I got a note back from Melissa that said that because of state laws, we couldn't do that. I've tried to find those state laws, and some of the folks I've been conferring with called the SOE, and they don't seem to know that there is a state law that says we can't have partisan elections.
Well,
So,
let me look it up, because I don't know off the top of my head either. I do know that in general, until recently, most municipal elections and constitutional officers like clerk of the court, sheriff, were nonpartisan. But something in the back of my head says that changed in the last year or so. So let me look into that.
In 2019, there was a Supreme Court decision. I sent it on to Melissa, but it referred to, I can't think of the exact words, although I think I've copied it somewhere, referred to heads of state, basically like the heads of the counties and things like that, but it didn't seem to not translate down to our own heads of government here. So
yeah, if you'd like, I'll look into it and then just send a short memo out to Melissa and she can circulate it to everyone on the committee.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Anyone else?
Can I say something about last meeting's minutes? I know we, I totally forgot and I apologize. I know we've passed to the next thing, but there is something I noticed on last meeting's minutes under unfinished business, part A, election issues. Under, I believe it's the first action item, it reads, motion to table discussion of moving November election to March, when I think it's should say motion to table discussion of moving March election to November. I just wanted to, I totally forgot about that. I made a note on my computer and I just realized that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos. That's a good catch. Madam Clerk, would you be able to address that as a Scrivener's error?
Yes, I'll just change it, and when it's posted on the website, it'll be correct. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that.
No worries. Thank you. Okay. Anything else for the city attorney? Mr. Blackman, you had your hand raised.
I would just really caution us in a discussion of going to partisan elections. I've always said that municipal government is unique in that government is the closest to the people in a local form of government, and everyone's day-to-day routine really revolves around the services of local government. And when it comes down to it, Republicans, Democrats, Independents all need their trash collected and their water delivered to their house, and in a safe and efficient manner. So I don't know if I'm just, I know partisan politics is creeping into it, and it's not a secret who is running, if they are Democrat or Republican registered or non-party affiliation. So I don't know what we gain by becoming a partisan election as a city.
I would say we gain information.
No, I would disagree with that. I don't think it's a good idea, but whether it's legal or not is one question.
Right. So I think in light of that, let's table this discussion. I don't think it hurts to ask the honorable city attorney to do the homework on this and report back. It may make it a completely moot question. Yes, Mr. Monroe.
Yes, this may be a question that you know the answer to, Mr. Chairman, but it might be a question for the city attorney. In speaking with residents, one particular question that was asked of me was pertaining to the term limits. I believe I was told that the term limits had been changed during the last commission period. And the question was, were those term limits then changed, and were they changed by a ballot initiative?
Yes. We overwhelmingly voted as a city to move from 2 to 3 year terms.
Okay, so but that was done for just so recently, so we don't have any experience with an actual 3-year term historically at this point.
Two 3-year terms already.
Right. So
there have been anyway. That's fine. That's not a question for the city attorney then, because you know the answers. But so there is a history of the 3-year terms having been already.
2019 was the first election where there were 3-year terms.
2019.
2019.
Okay, so
was when it went into effect. So that would have been Commissioner Hardy, who has resigned, Commissioner
Robinson. Commissioner Robinson is in the middle of a 3-year term.
Okay, that helps clarify things. Another question that was asked of me was, you know, in speaking of these term limits, particularly this individual I was speaking was quite outspoken, saying, you know, limiting the term limits, you know, you are in some respects shooting yourself in the foot, since it takes people a year just to get up to snuff to start out. And this particular person was bringing up, you know, what does the city commissioner actually get paid? I don't know the answer to that.
It's approximately $30,000 a year. But Mr. Monroe, just to be clear, do you have any further questions for the city attorney right now?
I don't know if that's a question for the city attorney. Melissa appears to know the answer to that, so I would say no. I don't have any questions for the city attorney as long as Melissa knows the answers to my questions.
I know the answer.
Okay.
And I was wrong, I guess. Okay, so with that, let's bid the city attorney goodbye, because it's expensive to have him here, and
exactly.
You know, working
Thank
on
you,
more
Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the time you all are putting into this on behalf of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you like to address Mr. Monroe's question about the compensation of our current commission? I will note, compensation is an agenda item that we had outlined for us to discuss after we got through the election issue. So it is something.
Well, it does pertain, and according to people I've been discussing it with, it's something to think about in terms of if we're limiting people's consecutive ability to run, or we're limiting terms, we're also limiting ourselves with people who are giving themselves for a fairly low and modest income of their time. So it's just a curiosity point that was requested of me. So what is the answer?
So the answer is the commissioners make $24,500 a year. They also get access to health insurance, car allowance, and either a city phone or a phone allowance. And then the mayor makes $29,500 plus the other benefits. I believe they went 10 years without a raise. I think previously they made $14,500 and $19,500. So it was maybe 2017, I think, is when they voted. I can look it up, but it was not that long ago that they voted for the increase, and it is done by resolution.
And the charter says that they can't raise their compensation within their term, correct?
No, I believe it says that they can't raise it. I think they give an amount of time, not within their term.
Okay.
And so, the commission that did vote for it, it didn't affect them.
Right. So, Mr. Monroe, I mean,
it affected some of them, I guess.
You make a very good point about the term limits and our need to discuss this issue at length. At the last meeting, you know, we had agreed that we would come back to term limits if something very material came up in our subsequent discussions. So I'd ask that we honor the current table, move on to the next item as we'd agreed, and then at need be, we'll come back.
Yeah.
These are all very good points. Okay, so with that, Madam Clerk, did you receive any public comments that I did not receive. And I'll note that I have one from Mr. Richard Stowe and another from Matt Portilla.
Let me check and see if anything came in since I left the office, but I only had the one from Matt.
Okay. All right. So while you do that, if everyone will bear with me, I'm going to just get this out of the way. We received a public comment from Mr. Richard Stowe. It reads, Chair Stevens, I favor being able to vote for mayor and all of the commissioners. In this scenario, commissioners are beholden to all residents and registered voters citywide. I have heard that some members are suggesting that registered voters only be eligible to vote for only one commissioner. I oppose recommended changes that will reduce the aggregate electorate's power to choose representation. However, I do have two concerns. One, the number of commissioners. Two, drawing of district lines. I believe district lines should be drawn to represent the diversity of our community and to best achieve a stronger, more representative city commission. The City Charter Review Committee should recommend that there be a mayor and 6 city commissioners. Suggested district boundaries as follows: east of Federal Highway, south of Lake Avenue / west of Federal Highway to the FEC railroad tracks, north of Lake Avenue / west of Federal Highway to FEC railroad tracks, south of Lake Avenue / west of FEC railroad tracks to I-95, north of Lake Avenue / west of FEC railroad tracks to I-95, and then west of I-95. Stay in touch if there are any other elements of the charter which you would like me to weigh in on. Thank you. Our next comment was from Matt Portilla. He writes, good day, Charter Review Committee. Thank you all for your volunteer time on this very important issue. I wanted to share my thoughts on the direction of the city's charter. 1, I feel single member districts would have the effect of creating an us versus them mentality between districts. I am against single member districts. 2, commission expansion makes sense. More representation is better. 3, elections should be held in March as they are in order for candidates to get their message out outside of state and national races. 4, the city municipal elections should adopt instant runoff elections, also known as ranked choice voting elections. Current runoffs cost a lot and have abysmally low turnout. Should RCV not be legal / feasible, we should eliminate the runoff and go plurality until the time comes that we are permitted to do so. The transition to RCV should be codified once available. Thank you, Matt Portilla. And then, Madam Clerk, did you have any others?
No, those were the only 2.
Okay, great. All right. So with that, let's jump into it. The order of the day is single member versus at-large versus hybrid.
Okay, I'll begin with a confession. I tried to figure out the population by district, and my mastery of census materials is not, well, there is no mastery. It's very tricky, and I was really unable to get anything that would be very meaningful beyond what Melissa might be able to supply about the voters per district.
Yes, I actually contacted our GIS department, and they're working on it, but it won't be exact because they don't have exact figures. It'll be estimates, but at least it'll be something to work from. And I'll send that out as soon as I get it.
Okay.
And I looked at the precinct by precinct voter registration as opposed to the voters, but what that doesn't include are people who can't vote but live in our area and deserve representation. And so that seemed to be not the best way to go after this.
And registration rates affect that. So.
Mr. Samshivasha.
Hey, I just had a quick question for Melissa. So I was wondering this as well, and you said GIS, which sort of ticked my mind. If we do end up recommending some sort of situation where the district lines are changed to, maybe in line with like the second public comment by Mr. Ortega, where he was naming the different streets and everything, the boundaries of the districts, would the city GIS staff be able to put proposals like that into GIS and create those for the Charter Review Committee.
You mean put in what the populations are or what they think the populations are?
Yeah, so, or just illustrate, for example, what the second public comment, illustrate the districts that he was highlighting.
So illustrate what he said, what Richard Stowe suggested in.
Yeah, different proposals of drawn boundaries around borders. If we end up doing some sort of recommendation.
Oh, I'm
that
sure
the
they could
borders
do that. I
change.
mean, we have the current one. We currently
So-
have 4 districts. I mean, they're pretty cut and dry, sort of east of Dixie,
Yeah.
west of Dixie, north of Lake, south of Lake.
If we're changing the boundaries, though, that could get very confusing when you're playing with lines and population groups. So I'm just asking, would GIS staff be able to put the various proposals that we would consider recommending into graphic format so that we could look at it instead of, kind of mapping it out in our heads?
I can't speak for them, but I will certainly ask them. I would think they could do that, actually.
I mean, I will note here, Mr. Samshi Basha, that I spoke with the Florida City and County Management Association, which is the trade association that represents all the county administrators and city administrators here in the state. And they have what's called a senior advisor program where they have senior advisors who advise on best practices. And I spoke to the senior advisor who's assigned to Lake Worth Beach, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Klenman. I also spoke to Dr. Bob Lee, who is the executive director of the Center for Florida Local Government Excellence at Florida Gulf Coast University. And both of them recommended that if boundary lines, that is, or proportional representation are really something that we think needs to be examined materially, that actually really kind of needs to be punted to what is called a boundary review committee. That's really not within the scope of a charter review committee per se. What's in our scope is to say, hey, the city charter should enumerate a boundary review committee if that's the direction we think we need to go. And then that committee in turn may come back and say, hey, you know what? We think the current lines are great. But that was the professional guidance that I got on this particular issue. Was it really should be the correct way to handle it is you have to set up a dedicated committee just for that issue. And it's worth noting that if you are going to proportional districts, you generally have to bring in consultants and demographers who specialize in exactly that to guide said committee. Yes, Ms. Robert.
I like that idea very much. I kind of find that we throw around things like that. Right now our districts are split very simply in kind of a quad. We talk about reordering boundaries in terms of on one side of the tracks, the other side of the tracks, which I've never really liked that misnomer. I think it blocks people into sections, and I think I don't know if that's a discriminating feel for me, or it just seems wrong. Whereas doing some sort of a study where maybe there are populations that kind of bleed over into different sections, we could have a proper blend to try to get better representation. I think it's fantastic to come up with boundary review. So would we not be able to at least go through single district voting, the rank voting, and then table that part of it until we get more of a boundary review, or at least put that on the table? I think that's extremely important with this growing city is to get that locked down.
Ms. Brown?
Well, I think I don't disagree, but I think if that is not part of what we're supposed to be doing, I think we can add to the language of what we're doing. We can specify single voter districts or not, but we can specify that and say, as the city boundaries change, we may, accordingly, we add another commissioner if we have another district added. That should take care of it if we can't, develop that district sizing ourselves.
Ms. Robert?
I'm good, sorry.
Okay. I mean, and this gets to the importance of having a regular charter review committee, right? So if we do decide that we want to enumerate, you know, an every decade charter review committee, we could also enumerate the need for a every decade boundary review committee, right? That's well, both those are well within our scope. But no matter what, you know, I think we all know we need to tackle this issue of single member versus at large versus a hybrid. And then whatever flavor that takes in terms of the boundaries is kind of the next discussion. But do we as a committee want to make the recommendation to change to move away from the current at-large system in some form? Yes, Mr. Monroe.
Just a comment from this one particular person. As you can see, I reach out to people in the community and people who are commissioners in other cities to just get feedback. So as far as redrawing, I agree with Ms. Roberts, you know, to put it perhaps out there that the boundaries could be, you know, sent out to a boundary committee. That's all fine and great. And putting out the question of the redistribution, the answer that one of the things that came back to me was the state legislature is who redraws. That is correct? Yes or no? Do we know?
It is my understanding that cities have the ability to draw their own commission lines, but
Okay,
this is a question for the city attorney.
That's something that's kind of important, because this particular person who was a commissioner on a nearby city said, this is her comment, state legislature is who redraws, so don't even think about it. That was her answer, was don't even think about it because it's going to be too difficult. So that's kind of an important question. Who does have the authority to redraw?
Mr. Goodstein?
The boundaries are set in the charter right now. So it is not true, as far as I know. It may be possibly that if we have a boundary committee or a some kind of municipal proportional representation, that something like that might be true, but I do not think that is the case. Melissa, do you have a thought on that?
There are different boundaries, as you are correct that the 4 districts in Lake Worth Beach are in the charter, but then there are districts for the state legislature. They're different than our city. I would have to ask Glenn, because when the charter was written, what, in 1925? So, you know, first of all, the total population of the city, almost, you know, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, 100 years ago, I'm not good at math, is very different, obviously, than now, as well as the populations of the districts. Now, at the end of September, we should have the census results. That will certainly maybe have some bearing on, maybe we can get more information, although obviously we didn't have 100% response for the census.
But I think you bring up a very good point that as a committee, once those numbers come out, it behooves us to look at them and say, hey, you know what, there's clearly some gross discrepancies here in terms of the median population or the distribution curve of each district. And then we're really gonna have to jump into this, right? And that may just be saying very quickly, we're in favor of a boundary review committee, but until then, I don't think we should, you know, pause the business of this committee. We should continue moving forward. This issue of single member versus at large versus the hybrid can sit on top of however the districts are proportioned. There's more nuance to that question than just, you know, how the districts are drawn. Mr. Goodstein.
Well, I hear a lot of both things when I talk to people. I hear support for single member, but I also hear the people who are worried about it. The concern that I hear most often is that the single member people will be selfish in some way for their district and attempt to only advocate for their district. So I wonder what my fellow committee people think about that assertion. I am somewhat doubtful of it. I think that even though a person might be a commissioner of one particular district, that they are still in fact members of a city that works together. I think that in big cities, I've seen this historically with things like your, whatever you call them, your Chicago committee persons. We're not called that. It started with an A.
Alderman.
Alderman, yes. Your alderman was a very powerful local official and advocated for his own in their territorial fights. But here we're only going to have 4 to 7, and I don't regard that as very likely.
Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I'm for, single districts without the extra additional folks, and the folks I've been talking to have done, have wanted to do that as well. And I've been talking to a lot of people. The parochialism of a single district, I don't think will exist in this city. I mean, it's just an opinion, but I think that we all care, no matter where we live in the city or outside, about the entire city. I think the economic reason for not adding, and our fairly low population, for not adding additional commissioners should weigh heavily on this group. The cost of, what is it, another $60,000 in salaries, or maybe $50,000 in salaries, is not something that the city necessarily can afford. And 4 people right now handle a whole city. And if they were handling their own districts, they might do quite well in, advocating for their own communities as well as the whole city.
Ms. Brown, I will respond to that because that did come up in my discussions with the senior advisor and Dr. Lee. And in short, they both said 7 commissioners is not too many for a city of 40,000 people, that there are cities of 100 people in the state of Florida that have 9 commissioners, right? It is a tax on city staff, but there are ways to manage that. The current city commission is actually doing a very good job moving some of their one-on-one meetings to a public forum. So there are ways to handle that. And I will also note that there's a ton of data out there that shows that investments in additional auditors, right, additional representation, additional board members for corporations or nonprofits tends to have a positive ROI. So I would encourage everyone not to be a penny wise, pound foolish as it relates to our ability to invest in getting additional representation, additional oversight, by having more commissioners. I don't think we should shy away from expanding the commission because it's not administratively possible. I'm told it most certainly is. And if financially doesn't make sense, I think there's plenty of data that shows it would make financial sense. Mr. Blackman?
Yeah. I don't, I'm not worried, I'm a big proponent about single member districts. And I think that if we add the additional at-large seats, I see that as being a buffer for any kind of provincialism. Can you hear me?
I think that's a good note. I'm going to add here that if we do recommend a single member, ultimately we have to ask the people of this city to vote to give away some of their power, right? I mean, the people that currently vote are the people who would be deciding, hey, we don't want to have as much influence as we do. So I think by expanding the commission, if we are going to go to single member, they get more representation in exchange for giving up some of their representation.
And I think we have a general acknowledgement that what we have now is an imperfect system, and we haven't tried what might be more representative of our population, and that is the reason to go forward with it. I don't see the addition of 3 additional seats that are all at large and keeping the at large citywide for all the districts, as Mr. Stowe suggests. I don't see that gets us anywhere. We're still having the same people vote for the same representatives, and they will look the same as the people that vote along the coast. So
It is worth noting, though, that out of every single public comment we have received so far, including from one commissioner and from a state representative, they have all been either in favor of keeping at large or a hybrid system. We have not received one formal public comment in favor of just going single member only. Mr. Shamshi Basha.
Yeah, thanks. So it's interesting what you just said, Ramsey, about the trade-off for more representation. I think that's a very interesting way to put it, because, you know, if the commission was expanded to 7 or 8, that would mean less people competing for the attention of their representatives. So that's interesting. But you know, I would just like to say I am at least with regard to the single member districts versus at large. I am from Alabama, which unfortunately has a long history of the Department of Justice coming in and basically telling local governments that their voting procedures are illegal. And this is something that, like, we just grew up learning in college and law school, is how these consent agreements work. And the number one commonality among all the consent decrees is that at large disfavors underrepresented groups, minorities, groups to that effect. And so when a city is getting looked at by the federal government for compliance with the Voting Rights Act, one of the best practices to make sure that those groups are actually, lifted up, so to say, rather than suppressed, is by instituting a pure single member district situation, so that, the most vote heavy, well-off, affluent district doesn't get to run the table. So, the public comments, it's interesting that they've all been from one side, because what I heard in the discourse leading up to the election and just my time out in the community, it seemed that, and even from the first meeting of this committee, it seemed that everyone really was interested in looking at single member districts, and that was one of the main issues, even going back to when Omari Hardy was proposing a charter review. So I would just say that I think that it's a very important issue. I'm glad it's getting a lot of attention, but I definitely strongly am in favor, first priority issue of pure single member districts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shamshi Basha. And I'm going to note here, if anyone is particularly passionate here, make a motion, right? Let's figure this out. Ms. Robert, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to remark, and I kind of like or agree with where Mr. Blackman is going. I feel that a hybrid is feeling good for the city, in that I'm not that worried about having too many commissioners at this point. I always think about city and economic development. I always think 10 to 20 years out. I think we need to prepare now for the expansion that we're going to have. We don't really have a good idea of where the demographics are going to go moving forward. It just depends on, the sign of the times and where we are going. I think having a hybrid is going to protect a lot of that if we go to single voter. So I'm feeling pretty good about exploring that a little bit more. And I guess that's all I really wanted to say about that. It's just that really think ahead instead of where we are now. I think we're going to get too stuck in, if we look at what we have now, we need to really look down the road into considerable distance. So.
Mr. Shamshi Basha?
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. If it's raised, let me unraise it. Oh, yep, there we go. Sorry.
No worries. Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I'd like to see if we can articulate both sides of this issue and present both sides of almost any issue we present here, if there is a division, to the commission with the with them knowing what the actual votes were, if the minority and the majority votes.
Well,
Because
I will note here, Ms. Brown, that I think this issue is of such importance that it behooves us as a commission to try and get to consensus, right? Because remember, we have to sell this to the commission, and then in turn, we have to sell it to the entire city. So if this is going to be a food fight between us, I don't see how it survives the commission, let alone survives public discourse. I think it really behooves us to say, how do we solve the current problems that are perceived very legitimately by large portions of our city, right? And construct, right? How do we try, try something? That's the onus on us, is to say to everyone, hey, look, you've got nothing to lose, right? Here's a way to try and improve things, to move forward. So with that, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I think I've said all along, I'm still in favor of the at-large voting. It's one of the things I was surprised by when I moved to Lake Worth, but I've always enjoyed, as I've said before, being able to vote for all my representatives. I've talked to a few people about this, and I suppose not surprisingly, they felt the same way. They were sort of surprised that we're thinking about going to single-member districts. Their attitude was pretty much, well, I vote, so I'd like to be able to vote for as many people as possible. I don't see they see themselves as the majority. They just see themselves as engaged citizens who want input on all their representatives.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep jumping in here as chair today, but I will note that when I started this process, I was 1,000% in favor of going to single member only, right? I thought, oh my God, we have to do it. This is totally untenable. And then as I've talked to all these professionals and done the homework, it's become very clear that no, there are a lot of benefits in terms of the quality of governance that you get to at-large representation. It would be nice if we as a city were voting equitably and had equitable representation on an at-large basis. We don't have that, so we need to solve for the underlying issue. But I just want to note here, everyone, my personal experience being on this committee is through doing the homework and through these discussions, I personally have gone from being 1,000% in favor of single members to, if you haven't figured, being in favor of a hybrid. With that, Mr. Goodstein?
Yeah, I have to say I am very strong. I'm beginning to like more and more Wes's proposal of the 3 and 4. And my experience as somebody who lives in a district that is, I'm pretty sure, majority Black and has only in its history ever elected one Black representative, or had one Black representative. Remember that Omari was from 2, not 1. And having gone to many an election cycle, gone to get the votes at the end of the night and found 93 people voting in my home precinct or less. 93 was good. 93 was a good turnout. And then seeing the turnouts in College Park of 300 and 400 a precinct, and saying, well, how can I knock on a door and tell people come out and vote for my candidate when they know turnout is going to be low? Their vote is worth much less than the people around them, than the other areas of town. Living in an area where the streets there were multiple streets unpaved and fire hydrants not done because of historic underrepresentation and outright racism. I am very firmly for the single member districts in a hybrid format. I understand the concerns of people who want to stick with the way it is. I like voting for multiple. I like voting for 5 people too, but in the end, it's a bad deal for people who live in my district. It's a good deal for people in College Park. I believe I'd like to see the addresses read of the people who the public comments who are for at large, because I think you'd find they do not live in my district. I think you would find that they live in, 3 or 4, District 3 or 4. I would be interested in that. I have to say, I'm more and more like adding a couple representatives for at large. If there are 3 at large, the people who want the at large representation can say, well, I got my 3 votes. I'm happy with that. And also you know, it may actually encourage people to run. And this just occurred to me because the voting would have more room for people who are, let me put it this way. Some of my favorite representatives right now are people who had to be shoehorned into running. And, you know, that shoehorn wouldn't have to be levered quite as hard if we had a couple more seats up there. I think I've covered everything.
Thank you, Mr. Goodstein. I want to note that you bring up the fact that if we do move to single member only, some people wouldn't be able to vote in every election cycle, right? So a hybrid also solves for that, right?
Hybrid also, yes.
Right, because if you're in a district that is just your district, and if you're not in the mayoral district, right, you would, or sorry, if you are in the election cycle with the mayor, right, you would then not be able to vote in the next election cycle, which, you know, I'm not crazy about. Mr. Samchivasha.
Sam, I really I appreciate your comment and your candor and your description of your personal experience with the precincts and seeing that disparity in turnout. I think that is the reason, and you know, and doing my homework for this issue and doing my own research. I think that's the reason that the NAACP unequivocally is in favor of a pure single member district election scheme, and really sort of goes off, so to say, on at-large districts as being unconstitutional. And this is the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They have a great one-page Q&A that, to Joyce's point, framing the issue on both sides. I think they do a good job of at least making the case, the equitable racial equity case, for a purely single member district electoral scheme. So Joyce, at least from my perspective, I think it's a NAACP one-page Q&A that, you know, I can send to everyone, or I don't know, you can just Google it, but it's a great little one-page write-up.
Okay, thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to see if we can bring Dave Wilson on board. What are you thinking, Dave?
I've thought about this quite a bit. I've done a lot of research. If we do need to present a united front, I'd consider the hybrid model. But I've done a lot of reading, trying to understand why people don't vote. I know it's not the job of this committee to discuss it. I don't want to get into it, but I feel people have a responsibility to vote.
Can I speak yet again from my experience? You know, I'm a super voter, but you know, for me, having a relationship with my commissioners is way better than voting, right? Like that is really the franchise. And I think by providing single member districts, you provide more people the ability to more easily build a relationship with their commissioners, right? Because their commissioner doesn't necessarily have to be running around all of town just talking to the super voters like myself, right? You know, you create a space for commissioners to actually walk just their blocks and get to know each of their representatives. So, I mean, Mr. Wilson, that's my argument here, is that single members actually, I think, or the introduction of single members would get more people to vote, right? Because more people would have a relationship with their commissioner, or get the opportunity to have that relationship, and by extension then say, hey, you know what, I want to show up and vote for this person.
You make a valid point. I will point out that I know all my commissioners, not because they've sought me out, not because anybody special, just because in the course of being in the city, I run into them, they know my name, and I know theirs. But yes, I do see your point about if we see this person as our commissioner, you know, we're more likely to go out and vote for him.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My cousin just called me. My uncle just died.
Oh, Madam Clerk.
My mother died 2 months ago. Now my uncle died. So I gotta go.
So sorry.
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 Well, Madam Clerk, that was, man. Okay, well, sorry, that was a,
So I would like
yes,
to
Ms.
move,
Brown.
I would like to move that we apply a single member district period.
Second,
Wait, what do you mean?
I would, my brain is a little garbled today. I would like a single representative district in each of the 4 districts, period, without the supplement of additional commissioners.
Okay,
Now, that means that you can move the opposite as well, but I would like to propose that as
and you do mean, obviously, the mayor would continue to be the
mayor would be
at-large?
mayor would be everybody's mayor.
Okay,
I heard a second.
Who was the second on that, please?
well, I was a second on that when it was originally single member district, but then the terminology got changed, and I'm very specific on my second was for the single member district wording.
Well, I think, yeah, that's what I would propose.
Then I second.
okay, so just to be very clear, everyone, this is just for taking the current system is at large. We would be going single member, no hybrid, except the mayor is still elected at large, no expansion of the commission, just changing one system for the other system.
Well said. I think if that's not the motion, then I would second that.
Okay, so it seems
Yeah.
we have 2 seconds for that motion. Okay. Oh, yes, Ms. Robert.
Do we have a quorum right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna note here, everyone, that yet again, this has to get through the city commission and has to get through the entire city. So, you know, the order of the day is constructive compromise and consensus. You know, we need to present a united front, but I'm gonna have to
That's
call
not
a
always
question here.
possible. That's not always possible, but which is why I think both positions should be presented to the commission for their debate. We don't have to come up with all of the answers.
Duly noted, Ms. Brown. Mr. Blackman?
Yes, discussion on the motion. I agree with Joyce. I think both of these should be presented. And I think someone should put in writing kind of a record or a story about how we came to these conclusions, the result of this motion, the result of future motions, and more than just the minutes of the meeting, and really give a report to the commission about how we came to this conclusion as a majority.
Okay, I'm going to note as your chair, I do not think this is useful. You know, we were formed as a committee to make recommendations and to find areas for consensus and to present solutions, right? If we just punt here and say, oh, hey, this is something you all should vote on, that's no different than, you know, what is in front of them every day, all day, every day. Mr. Goodstein?
My conversations with commissioners have suggested that they will take what we say and recommend very seriously. Now, you may put that as, well, politicians say that to all voters, but I think that one of the things that the commission is learning is that they have to put the brains accessible to them to work. So do not take it lightly when we pass a recommendation, because especially since some of us, after we pass our recommendations, will immediately begin lobbying the commissioners on them and supplying them with things like the thing from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Because
Yes.
frankly, I had never considered the voting rights law and as relevant to single members district. That is something I have learned here that really bolsters my beliefs about it. Now, as to the motion on the floor, my opinion is this. I am not sure whether we should pass things as a whole, as to whether we should include an increased size on the commission or individually. We could take this as a yes, and I would support this as it stands, but I would like to know whether people think we should. I would then follow it up with a vote on expanding the commission, which I think is also worthy of serious consideration. Do my fellow members have an opinion as to whether it would be stronger if we put those together or having them separately?
I mean, I'm going to, yet again, Mr. Goodstein, those are very good points. I'm going to note, as a passionate advocate who would like to see nothing more than the introduction of single member districts to this city's system of governance, because it's in my opinion, the right thing to do. It's the equitable thing to do. It's also, I think, a legally necessary thing to do. I implore my fellow committee members who agree with me on those points to try and reach for constructive compromise here. Let's go in front of the commission strong as a committee in an irrefutable way, right? If we can get to consensus and say, hey, we need single member districts, here's how we do it in such a way that we as a committee of 11 people from all over the city, after really doing the homework, we're able to achieve unanimity, to be unanimous around. That's a home run. So my point is, if you really care about single member, this is your shot, not to just punt it back to the current status quo. So I think I've said my piece here. Ms. Robert? Ms. Robert, you're muted.
If we're looking at a motion right now for single member, and that's not with at large, I don't feel that we've discussed maybe that compromise enough, because I think that does need to be explored more. I think that will probably be an easier transition to take for a lot of people. I think it speaks more for expansion. I think it will add greatly to the conversation in city commission. I think it will be a lot less divisive for the city to vote on. I think it gives a good compromise for all if we have the boundaries eventually drawn in the appropriate way, which I don't know what that would be. I think we need an outside for that, but I really think we need to continue and look toward more of a compromise for all instead of this way or that way.
Mr. Blackman.
Yes, I would be fearful of voting for this motion, in favor of this motion, because I think without expanding to the commission and adding the at-large seats, I don't think it really is a workable option. So I don't see it as an incremental thing. I see it as either or.
Right. I remember, folks, we have to get this into the ballot. And if we want it to pass, it really should be packaged as one item, because if you just put single member out there on its own on the ballot, I see no planet in which that passes, right? Because yet again, you would just be asking the people who currently benefit from at-large voting to vote for single member, right? So you have to mix it in with something so that people say, yeah, okay, I'm losing something, but maybe I'm getting something better. Mr. Samshi Basha.
I would just like to point out that if we expanded the commission, I think that would be a more difficult transition than switching over to how we count the votes, how we count who votes for what representative. I think that's a tougher pill to swallow. And I think that expanding the commission would be the only way to feasibly take the hybrid route. I would also like to add that we don't even have to consider that, because the truest to its core solution for the problem we've all identified is pure single member districts, not a watered down version of that. We have the at-large mayor, and if you add a bunch of at-large seats, the math dilutes what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
Chair Stevens, you've recommended we make a motion. I've heard motions and seconds for a pure single member district recommendation to the city commission. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion now, again, that we recommend pure single member districts, one at-large mayor, not expanding the commission, not taking on a hybrid approach, just a pure single member.
Mr. Samchi Basha, that motion is on the floor right now, and we are discussing it. I'm going to take exception to what you just said, though, about single member solving the problem. I actually would argue that the hybrid solution might facilitate more democracy and more equitable representation, right? I mean, I'm not sure that single member actually gets us more democracy, but okay.
I like to believe in quality over quantity. I'm not sure what you take exception to. Nothing I said was personal, but I don't think that more representatives can translate to more democracy. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have the more at-large districts you have, statistics show that those voters, the at-large voters, are going to be from, to be candid, like Mr. Goodstein, College Park. College Park's going to choose the 3 at-large seats and their own College Park representative, and then it's 4-3.
And the mayor.
The math is simple. To put it candidly, the math is very simple. The issue is clear. I just, that's it. But I'm, not apologies that you took exception to what I said. I didn't mean.
No, I didn't mean it personally. I meant I took exception to the substance of what you were saying. But Mr. Samchi Basha, would you be open to considering the additional seats being not maybe fully at large? So ultimately, if we were to do one at-large seat or one of the new at-large seats being, say, districts 1 and 2, and then the other one being 3 and 4, I mean, that would go even further in.
I see what you're saying.
The problem you are concerned
I
about.
think that's a solution in search of a problem. I'm sorry. It's creative, but I don't think that there's a need for anything. I think it's a very elegant solution. Single member districts. It's why the DOJ recommends it. It's why the NAACP recommends it. I don't think we should reinvent the wheel and create this, radically specific government in our wonderful little seaside town. Not to be coy, but I think it's a simple solution, purely single member districts. I understand that you're trying to seek out a compromise. But I just think that's a solution in search of a problem. I'm going to
note that I'm not seeking out a compromise for the sake of compromise. I'm seeking out a compromise here because I'd actually like to see single member districts. But I guess that message isn't getting through. Ms. Brown?
I think if you look at votes on issues, most votes are yes on issues, and even issues that you wonder about, they'll usually win with a yes vote. And so I don't think that's a problem. I think what you're doing, just to follow up on what he said, is that you're skewing the vote again. When you add at large, and the at large numbers, outnumbers your single voting districts, then you're defeating any possibility of equity in voting rights for folks. The single member district gives us another advantage, and that is the get out the vote advantage, because commissioners within their own districts should be able to pull out voters from their own districts rather than going after the voters in the most populated districts. They will work their own districts. They will help register voters in their own districts. They will bring out a vote in their own districts. It's critical that these districts get the representation that they deserve and have never gotten.
I couldn't agree more. Mr. Goodstein?
I believe Deborah had her hand up before me.
Ms. Robert?
Thank you. In what Joyce was saying, yes, I agree that there needs to be more people in certain districts that are voting. I think that's why we would go toward a single voter situation. So I think in that, and when people get engaged in voting for their own commissioner, it's going to get them more on board. It's going to get them those personal relationships back and forth. You're going to have someone that's going to be fighting for that district very strongly. With that in mind, I feel that that in itself is going to bring more people from those commissions to perhaps want to vote more and be more active, because they'll have more of a direct line to the commission itself. So I feel that having an at-large in is not going to squander that. I feel that that will kind of have something across the board for an at-large. So when you have broader issues or issues that kind of convey over everyone, the at-large, I think, will be a tremendous help as we grow as a city. I think that the single vote is very important right now. I didn't think so before. I do now. I also think that, yes, race is a problem. It's not the only problem. It's something we really need to incorporate. But again, when we're looking at the boundaries being redrawn, perhaps, I think we have to look at this as kind of a hybrid, because that's really what it is. Instead of just single, I think a little bit of a crossover the at-large will really put this city in a much better position to move forward.
Mr. Goodstein?
I want to thank Mr. Samshibasha for pointing out the dilution problem again. So I have to say, I've gone back. I can't support the expansion of the commission, and the creative way of doing it that you mentioned, Ramsey, yeah, that's just like too confusing. That would never go. People would say, what the heck is going on? I want to make sure two things. One, make sure everyone knows what a super voter is. That's what all of you probably are, that you vote on every damning election. Super voters are the ones that when you campaign, when you're a campaigner, they say you need to knock on every super voter's door in town 3 times. And what that means is you're going to College Park 3 times. If you're campaigning in my area of town, you got, maybe 100 houses to hit. Not a big problem. By going to single member districts, the people who run for office have to knock on every door and squeeze out every voter and find out what every little issue is in this part of town. Then they have to go and work with the people from other parts of town. So it's not minor. I really am sympathetic with Mr. Wilson's feeling that it's your responsibility to vote, because that's what I was raised with. It's not just a right, it's your responsibility. And if you don't go out and do it, you're failing as a citizen. I understand that. I want everybody to believe that. But in point of fact, there are a lot of responsibilities people don't take. I wish people were responsible for picking up their litter, but they're not. And you know what? I pick up a lot of their litter. That's just the way it works.
Well, Mr. Goodstein, forgive me for jumping in here, but you bring up an item that is dear to my heart as it relates to the importance of single member districts, which is I happen to live next to a school, and my street is, let's just say my street has prophylactics on it regularly. I'm sorry to have to be crude in this public forum, right? But I mean, it is, right? And, it breaks my heart that I have to see, kids go to school through, not just litter, but really, offensive litter. I don't know how else to put it. And I try and clean it up as much as I can. And I would love to have a single member district representative who I could just say, hey, you got to get the condoms off the street in front of the school, right? That's your job. You know what? Whatever's happening in College Park is College Park's issue. Your job right now is to get the condoms off the street. And forgive me yet again, but this is a real issue. I'm not exaggerating. This is an issue almost, multiple times a week, and that's, not seeking it out.
I can show you condoms in College Park if you want.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I'm going to note here that I still think, as someone who would like a single member representative, I also wouldn't necessarily mind having a East Side or South Side representative who I can do the same thing to, right? So yet again, if I could just go to my single member, then go to my South Side representative, and then go to the mayor and say, hey, there is a crisis here down on 6th Avenue South and for South Grade Elementary, right? You're trying to fix the schools. This is an easy place to start for the quality of life of the kids who go to school. And like, I don't know, to me, that seems totally manageable and much better than the current situation and might actually get approved by the voters, but I think I'm belaboring the point. And forgive me for that rant, everyone, but it's dear to my heart if you can't tell. Mr. Samshi Basha.
So I would make a motion. I think we've debated this. I would make a motion for pure single member districts, one at-large mayor.
Okay, so that motion was already on the floor. I will call it, seeing no further comments. Mr. Wilson, are you ready to take the vote?
Yes, so we can go slowly.
Okay, I am an aye. Mr.
I am an aye.
Basha? Mr. Vice Chair? Oh, no, Mr. Goodstein, sorry, Mr. Goodstein, you're the Vice Chair, sorry. Mr.
Yes.
Goodstein.
Sam is a yes.
Mr. Blackman,
No.
Ms. Brown,
Yes,
Ms. Claraday,
I think we lost her.
okay, Mr. Gallegos,
Yes.
Mr. Goodstein, or sorry, Mr. Morgan,
Morgan, he's not here. Unless he's
Mr.
arrived.
Monroe,
Nay.
Is that a no? Okay.
Ms. Robert,
Is this a vote that means single vote only, no hybrid at all?
Yes.
Nay. Nay.
Mr. Samshi Basha,
Yes.
and Mr. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Wilson, can you,
It will take me a moment. I want to make sure I get this right. We have one. Did Barbara White vote? Did I miss Barbara White's vote?
Ms. White is no longer with us. She has resigned from the commission or the committee.
So I have some off an old list here. Very well. And you did say that earlier. I have 1, 2. I'm sorry, I don't have a vote for Jerry Leanne Clarity either. I guess she dropped off.
You dropped off moments before the vote.
Okay. Bear with me. 1, 2, 3. We have 4 yeses and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's.
Okay, so the motion fails. All right. With that, I'm going to ask if anyone would like to make a motion for, I won't bother with the at-large, but would anyone like to make a motion for the compromise position? And I'm going to encourage yet again those who just lost the prior motion to make the most of this opportunity.
I'll make that motion for a hybrid.
Do we have and Ms. Robert, just so we have this clearly enumerated, this is what we've been discussing the whole time. 4 single member, we add 2 more at large, 3 at large.
3 at large.
Okay. I've been imploring the people who care about single member to vote for this. I'm going to, Mr. Wilson.
Second.
Mr. Monroe, I implore you to do the same. Let's go for consensus. Let's actually put a solution in front of this commission. Let's try something as a city that is potentially much better and much more constructive than what we currently have. Yes, Mr. Monroe.
Well, Mr. Chair, that would be with the potential for an amendment pertaining to the description of the at-large.
Yes, certainly. And you could make an amendment now to that end.
I'd like I'd like to hear more from you particularly and some other members as to variations on a theme for that.
I can't make a motion, but I'm going to go back to, those of us who, my peers who just lost to move to single member. If you're really concerned about the arithmetic, now is your time to make creative motions. Or, if there are any amendments to Ms. Roberts' motion that you'd like to propose that would make this palatable to you, please try to do so.
Mr. Monroe, I did not understand what you were asking about further amendments.
Well, in particularly, as Mr. Stevens was saying, with the codicil, that the at-large members be perhaps one for two districts and another for two districts, as opposed to them being entirely at large for the entire city. So I think that would be something I would like to hear more discussed. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, my understanding of that is that in that way, there would still be not at-large members, but members who there would kind of be the district members, and then there'd be members for a geographical area consisting of two of the districts. Or if we went to the population determined districts, which I think is a separate issue, they might be determined by the lines we have right now, the strict geographic lines. Well, the other four districts went to a proportional representation. Wes, this is basically the thing you came in with, without the proportional representation. Can you envision this with the north and the south, with two of the at-large people being kind of one for the north and one for the south, or one for the east and one for the west?
Actually, it's my understanding, and does the chair recognize me here? We're just
Yes, please, Mr. Blackman. Yeah, this is critical.
It's my understanding that if we do go to a ward or a single member district system, that does automatically kick in a proportionality requirement. So, yeah, and that's something we need to check on, but that's my understanding. Then I kind of like the idea of what I would call a super commissioner, in a way, of two districts. I do think someone said, and forgive me, I forget who tonight, said that that gets complicated to explain during a campaign, or to have a referendum on a ballot that tries to explain that. The simpler way is to go in with, what I have been thinking originally for what's turned out to be many years.
Well, but that has the problem of leaving it as 3 College Park votes or 4 College Park votes.
But it does address Mr. Stowe's concern about it being, and other concerns of people about it being too provincial, and that, the districts it would be a squabble fest at commission meetings. What are you going to do for my district? And nothing gets done. I don't see that happening in a 7-person commission.
I don't see it happening in a town of our size.
I did speak to the National League of Cities about this particular solution, and they liked it. I will note that that there are cities that have this. It has its benefits. It goes both ways, right? You fight the factionalism, but you also give people, as I just enumerated on my little rant there, the ability to use more factionalism in a constructive way, ideally. So this compromise on the compromise is adopted other places. And I'm going to, yet again, sorry for soapboxing, if you really care about solving the historic inequities in terms of representation in this town, they have historically fallen between East and West. If we were to have a Western at-large vice mayor, that would ensure someone whose job is just watching out for the Western side of town. That person would be completely there'd be no way to influence them from the East side of town. You get 3 commissioners who functionally could not be influenced from the East side of town. I mean, that is substantially better than the current situation. Ms. Robert.
You're muted.
Ms. Robert, you're muted.
Unmuted and unmuted. I like the idea. I like that you said the word fractionalism, and then you added the at-large. And, in thinking about Western and Eastern, again, we don't know how the boundaries are going to be redrawn. Yes, I hear that College Park are always the neighborhood that does all the voting, but perhaps that's something that with redrawing the districts again, having single voting, you're going to uptick quite a lot of votes. You're going to have a lot more voices out there. I think definitely looking at the at-large, Western versus Eastern, I think once that comes back with a certain study, I wouldn't say that's a defining line across tracks, but it might be something definitely to look at. It may be a squiggly line. We don't know. And we also, again, have to look forward, at least a decade. We have to think about what that's going to be. So I think that's where you would have, once we determined if that was something we could do, then we could go toward redrawing, the lines and getting some insight on that. But I would listen to the Western and Eastern. I'm not going to call it that, but that's what's been said, in terms of dividing at large.
Or Southern Northern, right? I mean, I live on the south side of the city. We also have a store. I mean, I'm not in Mr. Goodstein's district, but I'm very close to him. We have real problems here.
I think it could be something too that maybe those lines will cut College Park in half or something, just bite it at the quick and try to divide those at-large sections up in a way that's more palatable for all. But I still do think a hybrid system over time, it may be a little unbalanced at the beginning, but once I think people start embracing and owning their districts and understanding that they do have a say and they do have that conversation, that the broader spectrum of voters will come out.
Mr. Samshi Basha?
Just so I'm clear, Ramsey, I didn't hear you last time. Did you vote yay or nay on my motion?
It was, I don't believe it was maybe it was, but the single member, I voted yay for single member.
Could we read out the roll call again?
Yes, I would like to.
I think it's 5-4.
Yeah, I'm tallying the votes here. I want to make sure I have this correct. Could we go over the vote roll call again, please? Or I'll read off what I have and you tell them if I got it correct.
Let's do that, Mr. Wilson.
All right, for the ayes, I have Ramsey Stevens, Sam Goodstein, Anthony Gallegos, Joyce Brown, and Zaid Shamshi Basha. For the nays, is that correct?
That's 5, yeah.
Yes, for the nays, I have Wes Blackman, Philip Ross Monroe, Dave Wilson, and Deborah Robert, which is 4. So I was just about to raise my hand and say, I believe I got that tally wrong.
Well, good catch, Mr. Samshi Basha. Okay. All right. So this committee is formally in favor of single member district.
My apologies, as secretary, I should be replaced.
No, it's fine.
I was counting on my fingers and couldn't figure out why that went the other way. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just loud. I think everyone was talking at once.
Well,
Thank you.
and Gary dropped out, so that confused everybody. Well, I'm glad we corrected that before it got to the minutes.
Yeah.
We still have a motion on the floor for the hybrid, which I would very much still like to vote for.
Well,
come on. My response to that is come on. I'm sorry.
Well, it's a motion on the floor.
Mr. Wilson, did Ms. Robert have a second?
Yes, seconded by Wes Blackman.
Mr. Blackman, would you like to withdraw your second, or?
No, I think we should vote on it. It's a motion and a second.
Okay.
It incorporates the previous motion. So I'd like to hear from everybody about what they think about it. I don't think we've heard from Mr. Wilson or Mr. Monroe.
Or Mr. Gallegos.
Or Mr. Gallegos, correct.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm not a fan. I do prefer the pure at-large, but in the interest of compromise, I'm willing to go along with the hybrid version we have here.
Mr. Monroe?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of the East-West at-large.
Okay, so you're in favor of a compromise. Mr. Gallegos?
I'm more in favor of the single member, exclusively single member districts. I was originally in favor of that, and then I switched to being more inclined to the at-large expansion of the commission the 3 at-large seats, and then I then switched back to being in favor of the single member district. So, which is where I am now. I'm in favor of exclusively single member districts.
I would like to note here to those of us in favor of single member districts that, you know, our fellow committee members who are in favor of just at large have all agreed to compromise. So yet again, you know, those of us who are in favor of single member, if we really want to see this through, it really behooves us to have this full committee behind us. So there is a window to do so right now.
You know, but for an erroneous vote count, we wouldn't have ever had this motion or even had this discussion. Why are we trying? I don't understand why we're complicating it and why this is even on the table right now.
Well, Mr. Samji Basha,
pure single member one. I'm sorry.
Mr. Samji Basha, I'm not sure that's necessarily true. You know, anyone on this committee could have made a subsequent motion. We've agreed that we may re-examine issues. And I myself, as someone who
fair enough.
You know, part of the majority on that motion, I still think this conversation is very much warranted. Mr. Blackman?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to understand that the Constitution says that we're formed in order to promote a more perfect union. It's not a perfect union. And what we have now has proven not to be the best. So I would encourage some experimentation here. And I don't think that necessarily single member districts, even in a pure fashion, would necessarily lead to provincialism. I would like to address that right now, in that I think even the district commissioners would understand that they're part of the city of Lake Worth Beach, that their decisions matter in the whole, they're voting on the entire budget. And we also have to remember that, you know, our city commission is more a utility commission in terms of the budget than a city commission, because 2/3 of the revenue comes from the utility, the water and the electric. So, you know, regardless of where they live. So anyway, just noting that.
Yeah, but you do bring up a good point that, you know, we don't necessarily want people fighting over who has more resilient power, right? I mean, I'm very anxious about people, you know, fighting over who gets what electrical line upgrades, but we'll put that to the side. Mr. Samji Basha, and then Ms. Brown.
If you know, if we do go forward with a vote on the adding at large, I would definitely, I mean, to compromise, right? Like, definitely would be in favor of the super commissioner aspect rather than at large for the whole city. But, you know, I just do think it's a shame, because what we're going to end up doing is diluting what we're trying to do. We're overcomplicating it. We're going to spend a bunch of money on this to add seats. And I mean, I am not sure that's politically popular with the commission. I'm not sure it's politically popular with the voters to add 2 seats. Do we know how much that will cost?
It would $60,000. Yet again, I'm gonna note that I think this is something that comes with a positive ROI. I'm obviously biased here, but yes, the cost would be approximately $60,000 a year. But Mr. Samji Basha, I want to really thank you.
Is that per seat?
No, that would be for two more commissioners.
How much would it cost to move the elections to November? I don't remember that figure. I know it's not very feasible, but if we actually calculated it,
it would be $100,000 was, or I think approximately $100,000. I'm also remembering the number being.
It's like money's no object for, you know, at some phases of the discussion, and then You're talking about return on investment. Look at the turnout in November. You want to get voters out. That's how you increase turnout. You want to spend money on increasing democracy. Move the elections to November.
Mr. Samsi Basha, I think you
$80,000 to $100,000. I mean, that would increase fourfold the amount of turnout. And we're talking about adding seats.
So, recognizing that the November thing is not practical for other reasons than financial, if what you care about is voter turnout, arguably this is the next best thing. But your points are duly noted, and I want to thank you. I did hear that you were open to potential compromise. Ms. Brown?
Who is not open to potential compromise, solidly behind the single districts. But what I want to say is that I also, as I said initially, would like to present both sides. I think we do have a civil rights issue here when we're voting for one particular side, and a civil rights voting issue in particular. But I think the other side should be heard, and their arguments should be heard as well. But I think also that the majority should be presented as a majority, and the minority should be presented as a minority. I think it's only fair that these sides be heard. I don't know how many people are listening to us, at large in this throughout the city, but this is a substantial discussion and a substantive discussion that's going on. And I think people have a right to know what we've said and why we've made these decisions. And perhaps each side could possibly draft their issues for presentation.
Okay, Mr. Goodstein, you had your hand up?
Yeah, the perspective, Mr. Samsi Basha, the perspective of $50,000 or $60,000 in the city budget, let me just say, we've spent more on like one study probably than that. I cannot say that the salary, and maybe that was the previous commission's fault, but I'm guessing this commission will probably blow that much money on a study by itself. The November election issue, I believe the supervisor of election said hard no to that, because of something to do with the 3-year term. So it's not just a matter of money. Although in any case, I'm not sure what the chair means by finding a compromise on this. Perhaps Ms. Roberts would be willing to take a amendment that the 3 seats include 2 super districts amongst them, so that there would be a mayor, a super district to 2 super districts, including 2 of the other districts, north, south, east, west, or crisscross. Could be kitty corner.
Exactly. It could be diamond for all we know.
Right.
I think it's important because, as the chairman's been stating, this is going to go to vote. I suppose we all know that the people that are the super voters are going to be the ones that are the majority who are going to be deciding on this. And if we're really wanting to go to single voter, I think this is an excellent compromise. I think too, it will be a readdress down a couple terms, if it does go through to where it'll have to be adjusted again, through the charter. But I think mixing it up in this way, I think will be a lot more palatable. It'll have a lot of flexibility. And I think it's something we should certainly look at. So yes, I would definitely go for that amendment.
Okay, so Ms. Robert, you have formally accepted that friendly amendment.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Wes has to accept it as acceptable to him.
Can you articulate the super districts, please, for the minutes?
It's just that we would be doing a hybrid system where we would add 2 at large, but they wouldn't be fully at large. It would be 2 that represent 2 districts, or 1 commissioner would represent 2 given districts, another commissioner would represent 2 other given districts, and then there'd be the mayor, and then 4.
There would be 6 commissioners and a mayor.
Correct, but two of those commissioners would be super commissioners. They would represent 2 districts.
Voted off only by those districts.
Correct. So you have single member, and then you have like by district commissioners, or 2 district commissioners, and then you have the mayor.
It's like we have right now, except you add 2 super.
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Blackman, do you accept that friendly amendment?
Yes, I would. Yes.
Let me just throw in that should this go through, should we vote it through? And should the commission accept it? It's going to take a good package of PR to explain it to the voter. It's explicable, but there is no elevator speech for this one, I don't think.
Well, and I think that gets back to why it behooves this commission to have this vote be unanimous, right? If we are unanimous in this, it's sellable, it's doable. We move forward, we try something. And I really want to emphasize what Ms. Robert had said previously. There will be another charter review committee, right? This is a chance to try something. It's not the be all end all. Mr. Monroe.
Just to throw a cog in the wheel, you're saying that the super district commissioners would be voted on simply by those two districts. So whether you crisscross or go, if you crisscross, that's not going to work because College Park is going to overwhelm District 1. You're going to get a representative from College Park. You follow? So you could not crisscross. You could go east-west, perhaps. So the cog in the work would be that the population at large votes for the super commissioners. You follow?
I somewhat follow. I think what we're doing right now is we're just saying how these super commissioners will be allocated is subject to further discussion of the boundaries and proportional representation.
Okay, that's fine. If they're voted on uniquely by the two districts they represent, that will be skewed. Because if it's crisscrossed, you're going to get a vote from College Park. It's then a moot because that representative at large will not be really at large. He'll represent College Park. Potentially worst case scenario, where that's assuming that the commissioner simply wants to benefit the citizens of College Park, which is, we don't know that. Depends on who's elected.
I think east-west is what would definitely encapsulate what you're trying to get across. I would propose that.
Yeah. But then why would not the city at large be able to vote? Because those two supervisors or whatever they're termed are representing a larger proportion of the city.
Mr. Goodstein?
Mr. Wilson and Mr. Blackman had their hands up.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Wilson?
I'm putting my hand down.
Okay, Mr. Blackman?
I see it as being complicated to explain. Organizationally, if you take the hierarchy out of it, it does lay out an organizational chart rather nicely because you have the 4 district seats, and then you would have the 2 super commissioners, if we want to call them that, and then the mayor on top. So it's almost like a triangle. And that might be your elevator speech is saying, this is what we are trying to do. And you could even have that keyed to a map and have it color coded. So I'm just trying to knock down that we shouldn't think of this as a workable option because it's going to be hard to explain. I mean, maybe it's the best option.
You are correct. And may I add, I think we need to clarify and decide for ourselves if we're talking about north-south super commissioner or east-west.
I feel that's to be determined, I would say, with doing a little bit of study on it.
Okay.
To figure that out to make it viable.
Okay. Then one thing we definitely need to clarify, and I don't think that I made this in my actual motion clear, which is that the super commissioners, as we are calling them, would be elected by the 2 districts and not fully at large. Is that?
That's what I have written down in the minutes, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear because we began with 3 at large and we've now gone to 1 at large, the mayor, 2 via 2 districts, and then 4 via the individual districts. Is that clear?
That's my understanding.
And my feeling is that this is a possible motion because it sort of incorporates the motion that passed. Does everyone feel the same way on that? Or is that something that Joyce does not? So Okay.
I think you have to talk about voting cycles also and where they come in.
Well, but this solves for that, right? Or at least in my opinion, it solves for the issue of, I don't want to not be able to vote for an entire cycle. And if you're concerned, if you really care about getting out the vote and getting people engaged, giving them more opportunities to be engaged and get out, this allows for that. It allows for people to build more relationships with their commissioners. I mean, all the above. But Mr. Morgan has joined us, so I've been asking him to unmute. Mr. Morgan.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh man, I've been here since 6 o'clock. I'm so sorry.
Were you in attendance?
I'm sorry, Miss Roll Call.
And Jerry's back.
Well, Mr. Morgan, thank you for raising your hand. As soon as your hand came up, I did unmute you.
Yeah, I don't know if you couldn't see me before. I wish I could have participated in the vote for single member districts, although I believe it's still one, and now we're deciding on a hybrid of some sort. I just wanted to say real quick, for respect, I understand that I came in late and probably didn't hear all the arguments or the points made before 6 o'clock. I did start listening at 6 o'clock. I just wanted to, if I may, just talk a little bit about why I think single member district voting in its purest form, aside from the at-large mayor, is important. If I can be indulged.
Please.
So one of my concerns is the participation of the residents in Lake Worth. I believe the clerk mentioned that the city clerk, the madam clerk mentioned that, that we have an issue getting up to 53% of the vote, if 50% of the vote during these elections. Now, what I feel might happen when we expand the commission is that we'll still have those low turnouts. We have trouble getting people to elect a commissioner to represent their district, I believe. I'm sure maybe other people don't feel that way, but I think the turnout for voting shows it. And I think what's important is when you put single member district voting, you put these commissioners in a corner where they have to really put in the work and effort to get to know their district, to get a decent turnout, to say that they have some type of mandate or authority to represent the people of their district. Because I feel maybe some commissioners in the past, the way they conduct themselves, only adhering to or focusing on the people who vote all the time, I doubt they would have gotten a good amount of the vote, 30%, definitely not 50% of the vote in their own district. The way at-large voting works, I feel like when it's single-member district, you have to focus and make sure that the people in your district know you. And I don't think the residents are in the mood to get to know another two at-large super mayors or one super mayor for the district, one of the two districts they belong to, plus their mayor. I don't think the city of Lake Worth is there yet. I think a good step would be to do the single member district voting with the at-large mayor, and do other things and hope, my hope is that when we do that, we'll get individuals who will really work to get the vote out in their district, to show that they truly represent their district when they get elected.
Can you reopen the vote to add him to it?
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, I think we're going to allow you to record your vote for our prior motion as to are you in favor of single member districts, a single member district only system. So
thank you. I greatly appreciate that. I apologize for being late, and I would like to say that I am in favor of that.
Okay, great. So Mr. Wilson, can you note that?
I am recording it now.
Okay, and then Ms. Clairday, we lost you for a bit, and you're back. So
Yes, I had techno issues, and yes, I want my vote recorded for single member district only.
Okay,
So
Is that
now
a
it's
yes?
7-4.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
okay, all right, well, great. And insofar as our recommendation to the commission will certainly have more weight now. But Ms. Robert has a motion on the floor for the hybrid, which I think would give it a whole lot more weight, but I've made that abundantly clear. If there's no more discussion, I'm going to call the vote here on the hybrid solution.
I would like to say, I'd like to be heard before we vote on the hybrid.
Please.
I would encourage people to vote no if you want pure single member districts. This is procedural weirdness for a weird solution in search of a problem. This is just getting weird. I would encourage people to vote no for this and
Okay, Mr. Samti Basha, I'm
vote
gonna
yes
note
for
that
member
this-
districts.
Right. I am going to note that this weird solution is explicitly enumerated and recommended by the National League of Cities and in the model charter.
Procedural weirdness, Ramsey. You know what I'm saying. Sorry. This is strange.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by strange? What are you implying?
My count is 7-4. I mean, why are we having to vote no on something else before we can get to pure single members? It's strange.
Well,
Everyone's popping online, popping offline. This is strange. This is a strange Zoom vote. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that.
I do not understand what you're saying.
I don't see how we've deviated at all. We've been talking about hybrid
Yes.
for the last 2 meetings. I still feel very strongly about it. I think it's a very good way of easing this city into single voter. I think it'll be palatable. I think it's an excellent discussion point for the commission to review. I think it opens a lot of avenues for people to actually come out and vote more. I think if you have the hybrid and you've got the super commissioner plus 2 strong commissioners that are vying for those 2 districts together, you then have a very powerful vote, pretty much across the board. I don't see any negative to this. I understand that a lot of people have been feeling misrepresented and underrepresented. I feel that this is a way to really boost. I mean, think of it. You could even have 2 districts that have been underrepresented now that have a super commissioner and 2 commissioners, all 3 of them working to get people to vote for what they need together. So then you've got 2 districts that are underrepresented that are combined in one. I think that's fantastic. I think it'll be a very interesting way to go, and let's give it a shot for 2 terms at least, 3 terms at least, and see where it can go. I think the city would be more amenable to that. I think if you go to single vote only, people will not be prepared for it. We're coming out of some really awful situations, even politically. I just think that it'll be more palatable and easier to take, and I think it'll work well. I love that triangle approach that Wes Blackman had in explaining it.
We just voted 7-4 against that.
no,
No, we
Ms.
didn't.
Brown, Ms. Robert, that was a phenomenal summation of the benefits of your motion, in my opinion, and I'm ready to call that question. But Ms. Brown, we voted in favor of single member, and I will note as someone who just voted in favor of single member, I'm going to vote in favor of Ms. Roberts' motion because if anything, when we go in front of the city commission and this passes, we'll be able to say, hey, we actually voted 2 ways that were both in favor of single member. Different flavors, but both in favor of single member. So this is just another flavor. So with that, I'm unless there's a strong objection, I'm going to call the motion. Okay, Mr. Wilson, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I am obviously an aye. Mr. Goodstein,
No.
Mr. Blackman,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
No.
Ms. Clairday,
Can I abstain because I was not here, unfortunately, for the motion and the discussion?
that is, of course, within your right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gallegos,
No.
Mr. Goodstein, or Mr. Morgan,
Nay.
Mr. Monroe,
Yes, yay.
Ms. Robert,
Yay.
Mr. Samsi Basha,
No.
and Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Okay.
believe you got to count Mr. Blackman too.
I
I
call
have a
Mr.
yes for
Blackman.
Mr. Blackman.
I
Yeah.
missed it.
Just a point of order. I think if Mr. Our attorney were here, Mr. Dorsivia, he would cite state law in saying that if a member is present, they have the vote on a motion. They just can't abstain
Oh,
unless they have a
Then nay.
conflict of interest.
Then I vote nay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no's and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses.
Okay, the motion fails. This committee has voted this evening in favor of single member only. We did not reach compromise or consensus.
I counted 12 votes.
I will read them
Well, we have
back.
a majority.
Happy to read them back. I have Ramsey Stevens, yes. Sam Goodstein, no. Anthony Gallegos, no. Deborah Robert, yes. Wes Blackman, yes. Joyce Brown, no. Philip Ross Monroe, yes. Zaid Shamshi Basha, no. Dave Wilson, yes. Daniel Morgan, no. And Jerry Leanne Clariday, no. That's 11.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. As I was saying, this evening, this commission voted squarely in favor of single members on a majority basis, but far from consensus. And we did not obviously vote in favor of a hybrid solution. I believe our next meeting is still on election issues. I know that the city clerk, who has obviously done us a phenomenal job so far, I think we owe it to her to address her concerns about the runoff. So I would recommend that our next discussion be about the runoff and maybe other procedural issues related to the elections. Yes, Ms. Brown.
I was wondering if we could put together a series of our questions, a list of our questions that might affect the supervisor of elections office, and invite her to come to one of our meetings to address the questions.
Ms. Brown, the supervisor of elections will be speaking to the city commission on August 17th at length. I've also, and as is the city clerk, had extensive communications with her, as I know Mr. Morgan also reached out. What I would say is I would encourage you to direct your questions to the city commissioners to ask, or to ask them in non-agenda, or actually, no, that won't work, but ask the city commissioners to ask your questions.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Goodstein?
I am going to ask the city attorney to get us an answer as to whether voting by district automatically triggers proportionality, as Mr. Blackman suggested might be the case.
Perfect.
And that way we won't have to make a vote as to whether to do the redistricting by proportionally.
Right.
Or that won't be an issue for us. So
Okay.
runoff or ranked choice. Okay.
All right, we automatically adjourn here in 1 minute, but would someone like to make a motion, or is there anything else that we need to discuss before?
I will not be attending the next meeting, so you will need to find a secretary for next time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson, for letting us know. Yes, Ms. Robert. Ms. Robert, you're muted.
You know, in thinking about the single voter, I think I mistook in terms of the original vote, because I was under the impression that the single vote was in lieu of hybrid, not with the addition of hybrid. So if I can, I'd like to change my vote from the at-large across the board to the single vote.
Okay, great. That's much appreciated. So
Yeah.
we're 8. I mean, Mr. Wilson, can you note that?
Just so I'm clear, that was on our first vote.
That was on the first vote.
The first vote. So I will change Deborah Robert to an I.
Still standing on that hybrid amendment, but
Thank you for the attempt, Robert. But you're changing the motion helps. It means we're 8-3, right? So we have some force behind this thing.
and if anything, it does bring more discussion up, because I think anything that we bring up to this level and depth is only going to help us in the future with other things as we move forward. So.
Okay, thank you. Hey, if anyone else wants to change their vote right now, we'll entertain it. I mean,
Well, I was going to say, I thought too, like Ms. Roberts, that, if I didn't vote for that, that I was saying no to single member districts, period. So, I don't want to go on record as being against single member districts because I think that's a better solution than what we have now.
okay, all right.
So I am changing Wes Blackman's vote to a yes on our first vote.
Yeah, but I'll
Phenomenal.
keep
All right.
my yes on the second vote too.
Uh,
And I think it was a good discussion. It shows that we're studying the issue. It shows that there are nuances here. I think it will play well in front of the commission, that we're, kind of gelling to a consensus that yes, single member districts work better in Lake Worth, and these are the reasons why. And there are two different varieties you can look at, and we looked at both of them.
And I like the fact that we now have super district on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an option. I do like that as well.
How do
It's
we
not
have
one
that
or the
as an
other.
option? How do we have that as an option? Do we not just vote it out?
We did, but nothing happens if you don't talk about it first.
I like that we can keep talking. Thank you.
And also, as I've been saying this evening, if we recommend single member only to the commission, they're going to get a ton of pressure to not do it. So the onus to compromise might be on them at that point. Okay, all right. With that, anything else before we adjourn, or? All right, would someone like to make the motion?
Move that we adjourn. Dave Wilson.
Second,
All right, all those in favor?
Who was the second?
Deborah.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.